Exactly 9 days before a giant mushroom cloud rose over the Great Plains of Lop Nur, signaling China's arrival as a nuclear power, officials in the Pentagon issued a terse note. They are now ready to test, it said. In the spring of 1964, United States U-2 spy planes had begun operating secret missions never acknowledged by India from the Intelligence Bureau station at Charbatiya in Odisha. Flying at over 21,000 meters, well out of reach of Chinese air defense, the U-2s provided the United States with a god's eye view of China's most treasured secret, its nuclear program. As Indians debate the merits of the country's refusal to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, those secret flights point to the deep ambiguities that underpin its foreign policy posture. The truth is, India's cherished non-alignment wasn't always particularly non-aligned. Fence-sitting, moreover, didn't protect India from being impaled on the stakes of great power competition. From 1956, the Central Intelligence Agency had set about training and arming insurgents who had risen against Chinese rule in Tibet. Although the CIA secret flights supplying the insurgency operated out of bases near Chittagong in East Pakistan, they transited over Indian territory. CIA officer Richard Helms, the scholar and himself former intelligence officer Bruce Riedel has recorded, briefed Intelligence Bureau Director B.N. Malik on the operation at a secret meeting in Hawaii in 1960. Malik did not object to the project, Riedel wrote, though he did warn the Americans if one of the CIA's covert aircraft crashed in Indian territory, it would be a very damaging blow to India-US relations. The reasons why New Delhi chose to help the CIA aren't opaque. India's official war history, which is still classified but you can find online, shows New Delhi had considered the possibility of using its military forces to support Tibetan resistance to China in 1950. The government knew a strategic threat from China was emerging, but concluded it just didn't have the resources to fight back. From the 1950s, though, the CIA was basically doing New Delhi's work, and New Delhi in turn was willing to turn a blind eye. Zhou Enlai, China's foreign minister, wasn't persuaded by Nehru's protestations that he knew nothing of the CIA's intelligence operations. The sinologist John Garver concluded that whatever the actual extent of Indian complicity with US covert operations, Beijing believed that Nehru knew and cooperated with CIA efforts. Riedel similarly asserts that the CIA's covert operation played a role in Mao's decision to invade India. Former civil servant Sunil Khatri has even argued controversially that the real aim of the US wasn't to win Tibet independence, but sow mutual suspicion between India and China and thus destroy the non-aligned movement. There's no evidence in the limited declassified material available that this was the case, but its end result was indeed exactly that. From 1955 on, retaliating against the CIA's backing of the insurgency in Tibet, there were a succession of PLA intrusions. Barahoti, the Shipki La Pass in Himachal Pradesh, Korik, Khurnak Fort in Ladakh, these were occupied and outposts established. Long before the War of 1962, Communist Party of China chairman Mao Zedong had begun drawing lines across the Himalayas in blood. India thus paid the price for being seen as too close to the United States, without the gains that would have come from a deeper partnership or alliance. Following the 1962 war, Nehru began to lead India into a closer embrace with the West. In 1963, instructors from the US, Great Britain, Australia and Canada were training Indian Air Force pilots. 6 mountain divisions were re-equipped with US and British hardware. The CIA supplied India's covert Special Frontier Force with 8 C-46 transports and 4 smaller planes. There were limits though. The West had a treaty relationship with Pakistan and wasn't willing to give up on its anti-communist ally for an Indian post-dated check. The scholar P.R. Chari has recorded that from 1954 on, Pakistan had grown its military through its anti-communist alliance with the West. In return, It acquired assets which would also be used against India. The aid enabled it to achieve something resembling parity with its eastern neighbour, which it could not have secured without great power allies. After the 1962 war, United States General Maxwell Taylor visited India to study its military needs. Indians, he observed, were prepared to view themselves, implicitly at least, as part of a regional security community with the common objective of containing China. India wasn't, however, willing to join a wider anti-communist military alliance, and the opportunity passed by. Frustrated with Washington's decision not to offer India F-104 combat jets which it had sold Pakistan, and fed up with crude efforts to leverage arms aid to secure concessions on Kashmir for Pakistan, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri secured a deal with the Soviet Union instead. The Soviet alliance reached its climax in 1971 when Moscow helped secure India the Bangladesh campaign against United States pressure. Like other choices, however, this one had costs. From 1972 on, Islamabad leveraged its close relationship with China to act as a go-between for the United States and Beijing. Later, it emerged as a launchpad for the United States-funded anti-Soviet war in Afghanistan. Pakistan earned itself a free pass on its nuclear program as well as generous supplies of cutting-edge Western military equipment. These constrained Indian military responses, notably to the Khalistan and Kashmir insurgencies in the 1980s and 1990s. What does all this tell us about our present conundrum? For many Indians, New Delhi is just sticking up for itself. Europeans and Americans, right, didn't line up behind India on the line of actual control. New Delhi shouldn't side with the West on Ukraine. But that might not be the whole truth. Former US Ambassador Kenneth Juster said in a recent interview, and I quote, "The restraint in mentioning China comes from India, which is very concerned about not poking China in the eye." It's impossible to say what the truth is about India-US secret diplomacy, but Ambassador Juster's claim isn't implausible. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, after all, proclaimed no Indian territory had been seized on the line of actual control. And for all the muscular language it now uses, New Delhi has resisted being drawn into military contestation with China, realizing it could find itself at the losing end of a profoundly asymmetrical contest. Like so often in the past then, what New Delhi calls strategic autonomy might just be prettified language for ducking hard, real power choices. 3 lessons, in my view, are key. Firstly, the autonomy conferred by non-alignment was in part a myth. In a world shaped by great powers, India was necessarily forced into not so tacit alliances with one against the other. Second, non-alignment comes with cost, just as alliances comes with cost. Third, there is a difference between strategic autonomy and strategic autarky. New Delhi cannot stand alone, ignoring the currents of global geopolitics and pretending the world doesn't exist. Western powers, it is true, ought not ignore legitimate Indian concerns about its defense dependence on Russia, especially for critical nuclear and missile technologies no one else has offered New Delhi. The sword cuts 2 ways though. India cannot seek Western support against China while ignoring its partners' concerns on Russia and the wider world. As a new Cold War rises from the battlefields in Ukraine, India needs to revisit the foundational elements of its strategic culture and paradigms, free itself from the self-delusion and sanctimony that has shackled the country for decades. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint.